sprouting barley, and now we're going to have SproutX. So we're going to welcome Sam Trethewey. If you haven't heard of Sam, you haven't been paying attention. He's been around.
Excellent. All right. Just give me 2 seconds. A tad dry. All right, so today I want to talk about SproutX. I want to introduce that to you, but I suppose I've not been brought here to pitch SproutX to you or convert or sell it to you. I also wanted to bring up some other issues that I think we have in Australian agriculture as we start to think about innovation and alike. And so those three things would be made up there. So I want to talk about commercialising. And it hasn't actually really been mentioned a lot so far, which is a great surprise because we can talk about innovation and research and development as much as we want. And having I'm a farmer myself, we've still got the family farm, I've worked on a number of major commodity groups across Australia. Unless that research and innovation is commercialised and put into a farm situation or any business across any industry where it actually generates a return, now we're talking. And I suppose that's what I wanted to focus on today with most of my presentation. Also wanted to talk about froth. There's a lot of froth in the ag tech market. Drones, I'm going to bring up a bit later. We haven't quite found a way of getting them to make money yet. Yet $1.2 billion has been invested, and also disruption, and I'll refer to Sundrop on that, but I'll go easy on you, Steve. I also wanted to just make one point. I think a lot of people in business forget something that's very, very simple, and that would be around that income must exceed expenses, right? It's really basic, but we know there's a lot of people in our industry and across any sector that struggles with that very simple idea. And if you can take anything away from my presentation today, it would be something along the lines of that free markets essentially reward efficiency. That's exactly what they do. We're a free market. We're trading with free markets. We've got all these free trade agreements. At their very nature, they reward efficiency. That's exactly what they do. And so the more efficient you become in your business, the more you'll be rewarded. And I suppose if that's anything you can take away, I'd love for you to think about that when you start building some things around your business. So commercialisation, it's a bit of an issue in Australia. We don't seem to commercialise particularly well. We have a competitive advantage in Australian agriculture. We're all very well aware of that. Am I in the way, guys? Can you see okay? Cool. So we've obviously got a huge talent pool, and that's evidenced by what's standing in front of me today. An amazing knowledge base, we know that, and a real cultural passion. And I actually work now for a financial services business, which is behind SproutX, and it's regularly spoken about how much passion people from finance see in ag, and of course we're all so used to it, but it really stands out. But we're not commercialising that well, and it's really hard to find a metric to quantify commercialisation. One part of that, I would say, would be the way we look at patents. It's not a silver bullet, but it's just a suggestion, and I think these figures speak for themselves. 2014, USA, 330 million people. New Zealand, only 4 million people, and Australia, we've got 23 odd million. So that says for every 2,000 people in the US, there's one domestic patent registered in the US. A similar figure in New Zealand, Canada and the UK were about the same. In Australia, it's one patent per 20,000 people is registered in 2014. So it's, again, not a silver bullet on quantifying commercialisation, but we're having a few issues here. It's also represented by the amount of venture capital activity, and I'm just going to bring up ag tech here. So 4.8 million went into ag tech last year in Australia, and 2.2 billion into the USA. I would also say a lot of that 4.8 would have been Bosch's contribution into the Yield, which is a sensor tech ag startup from Tassie, and they've put $3.5 mil into that over the last couple of years. So again, per capita, Israel, $68 per person in Israel is put into ag tech venture capital. USA, $6.88, Canada, $5.03, UK is about $1.90, and we're sitting at 21 cents. So we do have an issue. So the crunch. The limited support for our entrepreneurs and our startups. We know this. We're one of the last developed nations to develop an active ag tech ecosystem to support the commercialisation of innovation. We also have fairly poor access to capital. Now, I always think that capital will always find a good investment. There's billions of dollars trying to get into the sector right now. They will fish out the good investments, but of course, compared to the US, our access to VC funds is a little bit light on. We don't have any support networks like I've just mentioned, and old Will Patterson here, he's a mate, he's from a farm out near Bendigo, came up with a bit of an ag tech startup, had no access to capital or no way that he could build his business, so he just went to the US. 20 grand, gave up 6% of his business, had 30,000 customers in the first 3 months, smashed it, and we lost that IP, we've lost that knowledge. Fortunately for us, and unfortunately for Will, he had to come home due to personal circumstances, but you know, there's many Will Pattersons out there. So the opportunity is, we've learnt from the US, we've learnt from Israel, and we need to develop an ag tech ecosystem. We need something to really, I suppose, start driving some commercialisation in our innovators. And I suppose this is what we need for startups, and I suppose this is what SproutX, this is what I've been working incredibly hard on with a number of other people in the team to build for Australian agriculture. So government support, that's government funding and whatnot. Distribution, not much point having an awesome product if you can't get it in front of customers. RuralCo are coming on board as a supporter and a foundational partner, 500 locations around Australia, and they actively want to distribute our startups' goods and services. Technology partners, Bosch, biggest sensor manufacturer in the world. 27 Bosch sensors are in your average car, no matter what make or model, about 120 in your tractor and upwards of 250 plus in a combine harvester. And there's about 5 in these, you know, the little thing that makes your portrait landscape thing, that's a Bosch sensor. So they've got stuff in everything. They have a lot of solutions, but they don't know what their problems are in ag, so they're coming into SproutX to find out how they can enable that space. Mentors, we're trying to do what we can to get the best and brightest, a lot from overseas, and of course domestically where we can. Investors, we've actually just setting up an ESV CLP, which is basically a fund for ag tech. It's the first one in Australia. They operate quite well in the US and Europe. So it's a $10 million fund that we're setting up that's purely sitting there to provide fuel and fuel early stage startups in the SproutX program. We need to get these guys getting access to smart money. Exposure, we've got agreements with Fairfax, Weekly Times, giving our startups credits to get their stuff out in the market, and a co-working space. Co-working space, we have a great location in Melbourne. This is not about getting everyone into the cities though, we're doing regional hubs as we grow. But you know, we've heard about Uber and Airbnb a lot already. They didn't come out of an accelerator, but they came out of a co-working space. They came out of a face-to-face interaction where great things happen. You know, one guy said, I'm pissed off, I'm so sick of paying, cash to cabbies, and one's like, I don't even like catching cabs, So they created Uber and it came through, and that was the result of like minds sitting in the same room. So we want to start to create that. It also protects, I think, entrepreneurs from the tall poppy syndrome that we have in Australia, which is really, really stifling, and don't get me started driving into the cultural drivers as to our current state of startups. So essentially that's what SproutX is setting out to achieve. It's a joint venture between the National Farmers Federation, Findex, and Findex. Findex is the largest privately owned financial services company in Australia. You may be familiar with their brands, Crowe, the tax and accounting firm, 110 locations around Australia and New Zealand. So they're pretty actively involved in agriculture and are the largest professional services provider to ag. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of the programs. I want to keep the pace up here if you don't mind, because I've got a few little things I want to cover off on. So we've got 4 programs essentially. There's the Pre-Accelerator Program, which we launched on Friday. Applications are open, 6 weeks online with an hourly mentoring session with a really great mentor, Skype, no matter where you are, for very early stage ideas. Then you go into the actual SproutX Accelerator. So very much your atypical 6-month accelerator. 5 weeks you can spend in the regions. If you're based in Dubbo, Wagga, Esperance, I don't care, wherever you are, you can get access to SproutX. And then you would ideally come into that co-working space for all the reasons that we've just discussed. So basically how it works is a board recommendation on the startup. So this is what you need to do. You need to focus on this. Your proof of concept's not good enough. You need to do better market validation. Your financial forecasting, your modeling's not good enough, They get their funding. They then come into the accelerator, which is your classic Silicon Valley team, technology and traction, and that's how you're assessed. Most people will usually have a great tech and great traction, but their team's not good enough. And it pains me to say, but it might be run by someone who was, is a farmer or is a scientist, and they're not necessarily a commercially minded entrepreneurial person who's well equipped and experienced in dealing with venture capital and those kinds of really high level commercial discussions. So that's a lot of what I do, is I'm dealing with people that are coming in thinking that they've got all the answers, but we've got to start back at the team and start looking at who's driving this. And then, of course, they'd get to pitch to investors, and we've got a number of venture capital firms from all around the world wanting access to deal flow in Australia, and so we're providing them with that. The second piece, or the third, I won't touch on the third one. The fourth and major part of what we're doing, and I suppose this is a focus on commercialisation, is the Corporate Accelerator. So there's $1.4 billion is spent on agricultural R&D every year. And from an ROI, personally, I'm going to say it, if we're here to have some sticky conversations around innovation and some of the real challenges, having been brought up on the farm, I don't see it. I don't see the ROI on that, on all those funds. Coming from a very commercial background, I need to see that money, at least break even every year. It'd be good on productivity gains. That's fine. SproutX is out there to help RDCs and other organisations commercialise their technology. We've just signed a deal with MLA. They've got 45 very real industry problems that they want to put to our community and ask for technology and teams to come up with solutions to very real industry problems. And a few of the other RDCs are keen to have a conversation as well. So this is represented very quickly here. So that might be, I've got some cool startups working there at the moment. A couple of them are Israelis. I don't know what is in the water in Israel if you ever go there, but you've got to drink it because these guys are just insane what they're coming out with. One guy's he's actually reduced bruising in pink lady apples on farm by 40%. Did it in 6 weeks, and he's already signed up the largest asparagus grower in Australia and a number of farmers in the Goulburn Valley region. He's heading into Tassie. He's only been here for about 6 months. So awesome stuff. So he's a guy with a team and an idea with some traction. He comes into the Public Accelerator. We give him 50K, we take 8% of his business, and he goes into the Accelerator Program. This is more for the corporate innovation program, so you might even apply to us and say, hey, I love red meat industry, what are some of the problems? I think I've got some technology, or I'm an entrepreneur, I want to help out, I want to be involved. You come into the Corporate Accelerator Program, we match you up with whatever else that you need. We take a bigger equity stake, we give you the cash, and we put you through the accelerator. So that's the Corporate Accelerator Program model. I'm nearly finished. I'm just going to wrap up now. So the second piece of what I want to talk to you about was froth. I call it froth. There's a lot of froth in the ag tech market. Like I said, 1.2 billion has gone into drones. And I wasn't surprised to hear yesterday that, 15% of farmers aren't going to, I suppose autonomous tractors and drones, that they didn't have a lot of hope in it, or they wouldn't bring them onto their farm. That's because they're not deriving a commercial outcome yet. We don't have a subsidised agricultural economy here, as you know. We don't spend money on stuff that doesn't create an on-farm efficiency generally in Australia, and that's the case here. So this is me in Guangzhou at the Canton Trade Fair. Everyone was raving on about drones. It's a 3 metre wide boom spraying drone. You guys know enough about agriculture for me to run through these numbers. 3 metres. She holds 7.5 litres. You know where I'm going with this. 7.5 litres, 3 metres wide. Let's fly it at 20 kilometres an hour. She's covering 6 hectares an hour. I worked out that's 3 minutes. You can spray for. Then you've got to bring it back in, fill her up, out you go again. You can only do that 2.5 times before it shits itself in the paddock and dies, because the battery life at full load capacity only lasts about 25 minutes. So we've got a few issues, but people are throwing money at it. It's crazy. So I have no doubt they'll be a part of the solution one day. A lot of other technology's got to start catching up. Irrigators have got to start talking to them so they can do section control, sprayers. It'll all happen, but right now I would call it a very frothy part of the ag tech market. So the adoption, especially in places like Australia, is very slow, but they are cool toys. And my last piece is around disruption, and I think there's been some really great conversations here around farming better and farming more efficiently and focusing on what we do best. And there's a lot of cab licenses and cab drivers out there that thought they were getting people from A to B really, really safely. And there's a lot of hoteliers out there that thought they were doing a cracking job of supplying hotels to people all around the world, and they got disrupted big time. Big time. And I'm going to use Steve's little example here. Is they're going to take up 12% of supply into Coles tomato, Trust tomatoes. And old mate here has been doing a great job for however long with his tomatoes, but he wasn't looking sideways. And if he was, what would he have done? Would he have pivoted? I don't know. But my suggestion is Sundrops is just a start, and there's going to be lots of other Sundrops and other different verticals and other different parts of our sector that is going to pop up and disrupt our industry. And it's how ready we are for that, because this guy, I can tell you, wasn't expecting Sundrop to come along. I think Sundrop's an awesome initiative. I'm incredibly excited about it, but as a perfect example, there's a disruption piece. So anyway, that was a fairly quick, oh, thanks, mate. But yeah, fairly quick rundown. Happy to ask questions. I'm around tonight, and we're going to jump on the panel now. So thank you.
Okay.